we would like to present the scariest Halloween podcast out of Tasty Hills. All the stories are real and actually happened to our colleague. Now, listen closely. Maria, narrative designer.
Something came to me on Halloween night while I was sleeping. It left me a message. I write scripts, and inspiration usually strikes me at night. In those days, urgent deadlines, late night work, and a frequent lack of sleep were a part of my life, and I didn't pay much attention to how tired my daily regimen was making me. Why would I have changed anything? I lived alone, so my all-nighters didn't bother anyone. That night wasn't different from the previous ones. It was Halloween, but I was working. I absolutely had to finish a story about ghosts. I was up until midnight, and eventually, I got so tired that I barely had the energy to place the final punctuation mark, crawl into bed, and instantly fall asleep. In the morning, I reread the story I wrote with a clear head. Everything was fine until I got to the last page. There, immediately following the last paragraph I'd written late at night, another sentence had appeared. It said, "If you don't go to the bed on time, you'll become just like me."
Valeria, narrative designer.
My husband and I recently moved to another country for work. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment in an old prefab apartment building. It wasn't particularly remarkable, but it had definitely seen a lot in the several decades since it had been built, which would have been fine. An apartment is an apartment, but starting on day one we heard strange noises in the kitchen. At first, we didn't think anything of it. The sounds could always be chalked up to something ordinary. Neighbors, pipes, outside noise. It could have been anything, right? The building was old, and we hadn't had a chance to get used to it yet. But eventually something happened that my husband and I couldn't ignore. I was using the second bedroom for work to avoid outside distractions. It helps you get in the right mindset when you work from home. That's what it was like at first. I worked with the door closed, ignoring the occasional weird noise from the kitchen and not thinking about anything supernatural. One day, I happened to notice a dark shadow in the corner of the room. I was so surprised, I almost fell off my chair, but at second glance, I didn't see anything unusual. I reassured myself that it was just my imagination, turned on the light, and got back to work. I didn't think about the incident again until the next evening when my husband told me he'd seen the dark shadow of a man in the same room. It wasn't like we made a serious attempt to fend it off. My coworkers suggested we should sprinkle salt in the corners of the apartment. That didn't help, so we just left it alone. The ghost periodically makes an appearance in dark parts of the apartment, but it doesn't scare us anymore. In fact, we've grown used to it, and now we affectionately call it our ghosty.
Max, programmer.
When I was 16, my grandfather died. It was in the middle of my summer vacation from school. Something weird and eerie happened a few days after his funeral. It was nighttime, and I was at home in the country, lying outside on the porch where I sometimes slept, and mindlessly messing around on my laptop while the crickets chirped. Everything was normal, until I suddenly looked around and noticed that it was deadly silent inside the house, and the darkness seemed to have thickened around me. The light from my phone and laptop just barely lit up the porch. At that moment, I realized with horror that I wasn't alone. At the far end of the porch, something was moving. Something that looked like a person's shadow. The closer it came to me, the darker it got. I was overcome with fear as I realized that I wasn't asleep, and this definitely wasn't another incident of sleep paralysis. The sensation was different. My body became too heavy to move. I was frozen still. A moment later, I heard my name from the darkness in a whisper, cold and emotionless. A dark silhouette loomed over me, and I pressed my back harder and harder into the bed in a futile attempt to distance myself from the shadow. I wanted to sink into the ground. I was so petrified that I only barely managed to call out to my mom, who was asleep in the next room. When she turned on the light, the apparition vanished. To this day, I have no idea what it was. Could it have been my grandpa coming to say goodbye to me?
Our podcast has come to an end. We'd love to know whose story you like the most. Maybe something similar has happened to you? We look forward to seeing your responses in the comments. See you later!